Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for coming to Wildland Sentinel with Erika Billerbeck. My name is Michael May. I'm one of the librarians at Carnegie-Stout Public Library. And before we get started, I wanted to let you know that we're recording the Zoom session. And if everything goes well, technically, and the video looks like it works, we'll go ahead and share that probably on the library's Facebook page and YouTube channel in a few days. I'm really excited about the event tonight. If there are any technical problems or difficulties, if we get disconnected, go ahead and try to log back on with using the link that I had emailed to you, and we'll see if we can keep things going. Every once in a while the lights go out and there may be internet connections, but we'll struggle through that, and I think hopefully it'll turn out well. Tina Elward-Gerke from Corridor Outdoor Adventures has been kind enough to join us with Erika Billerbeck, and I think Tina and Erika are going to kind of talk about the book and Erika's work, and I'm going to be in the background for a little bit. I'm sort of new at the Zoom, so if I can see if I can spotlight Erika.
There we go.
And I think that looks like it'll work, and we'll go ahead and get started.
All right. Well, I feel like the pressure's on, because if it doesn't go well, he's not gonna post it. So we can't screw this up, Tina.
All right.
We have to do a good job. So I can see some of your faces, not all of your faces, but I wanted to thank you for coming. It's kind of a nice night to like be indoors and huddled up by a computer, because it's, at least over here, it's raining. I assume it is over there, but I don't know. I don't have a very good feeling for how many of you have actually had a chance to read the book yet. So I thought I'd just start out, assuming that most people have not read the book, talking a little bit about my background and why I wrote the book, and a little bit of background about what a conservation officer even does, because I think there's a little bit of kind of confusion around that sometimes. But I really want you guys to participate and ask questions. I am not the greatest public speaker in the whole world, so if you could ask questions, that would help me out, either by just asking them, or you can go down to the chat function down at the bottom of this, at least I assume it's on the bottom of your screen, and put in questions, and we'll try to answer those questions as they come in. So just a little bit about me. I am from Northeast Iowa, not as east as Dubuque, but the New Hampton area is where I primarily grew up. And following high school, I went to Luther College up in Decorah. So that's kind of where I call home. At least that's where I feel like I'm from. Following college, when I was in college, I really decided at that point that I kind of wanted to go into environmental education. And so I took biology classes and things like that, and ended up getting hired as a naturalist in the middle part of the state. So I did a lot of public programs for kids and adults and school programs and things like that. While I was a naturalist, I kind of started riding along with some of the conservation officers in the area, and just kind of, after about 5 years of being naturalist, decided that I wanted a little bit of a change, that it was kind of, seemed like kind of an exciting thing to do. So I happened to have a friend that worked for the Wisconsin DNR, and she was what they call a deputy warden, and ended up introducing me to her supervisor, and I went over there for an interview and got hired as a deputy warden. So I went through the police academy over in Wisconsin. I worked there for not too long, about a year, before I was offered a job back here in Iowa. So I came back to Iowa and have been here ever since, obviously. I've been a conservation officer now for 20 years, which seems like, I remember when I was first hired, like the people that said they were on for 20 years, it was like they were super old. And I don't feel super old, but I must be because I'm one of the old people now in my department. So as far as the book goes, some of you may know, I guess I may not, but I used to write the Warden's Diary column for the Iowa Outdoors magazine. I did that for about 10 years, and that kind of started as a fluke. I didn't have any plans on writing it, but the officer that wrote it before me, Chuck Humiston, retired, and they were looking for another author for that column. And the head of the communications bureau, I don't know where he got this from, maybe Chuck told him, but he said that he thought I could write and he wanted me to submit a column just to see how, if I could write a sentence, I guess. So I did that, and they kept me, and I wrote that for about 10 years. And as I was in the process of, getting used to writing that column, it really became, really one of my favorite parts of my job. It was probably the most satisfying part of my job, was writing that column, surprisingly. But then the magazine, with leadership in the DNR at the time, they decided to make some changes to the magazine. And at that point, I decided I just wanted to kind of maybe work towards writing a book instead. So I turned my attention to trying to write some stuff down and make it more of a book type thing instead of a magazine type thing, which the difference mainly is Iowa Outdoors magazine was obviously a family friendly magazine. The book, there's stories in there that I never could have written for the magazine because they're maybe not so much for kids to read. And also just the length alone, I was held to about 1,000 words for the magazine, and now obviously with the book I could expand on that. So that's why I decided to write the book. One of the reasons anyway. I've always wanted to write a book ever since I was a little kid because I love to read, and I've always been a reader. I just never thought the book I would write would be what it ended up being. Then the other reason I wanted to write the book is I think throughout my 20 years, I've found that I get a lot of questions and a lot of confusion surrounding what a conservation officer does. I get questions all the time about why I'm wearing a gun. People just don't have a concept. A lot of people think, we're out there saving animals or rescuing deer and things like that. And really, we don't work a lot with animals. I mean, a little bit, but primarily the people I work, or the animal I'm working with is people, and I'm trying to sort through keeping people doing what they're supposed to be doing and staying safe at what they're doing. So I thought I'd read just a little segment. If any of you get a chance to read a book called Nature Noir by Jordan Fisher Smith, I stole one of his quotations and put it in my book with his permission, because he really described well what a conservation officer does. So I thought I'd read that little section, and we can move on from there. So conservation officers are tasked with protecting the state's natural resources, mainly by way of law enforcement. In Iowa, conservation officers are state peace officers, which means we can enforce any of the laws of the state. Our primary focus is on those laws that could impact the state's wildlife, land, and waters. But although we work for the land, we spend much of our time dealing with people and their problems. In Nature Noir, his memoir of 14 years he spent working in a pair of river canyons slated to be inundated by a dam, law enforcement park ranger Jordan Fisher Smith summarized a conservation officer's duties like this: you protect the land from the people from the land, the people from each other, and the people from themselves. It's what you're trained to do without even thinking, a reflexive and unconditional act. If you're lucky, you get assigned to people who seem worth saving and land and waters whose situation is not hopeless. If not, you save them anyway, and maybe in time, saving them will make them worth it. So I thought his summary is really fitting for what we do. It's a lot of trying to manage people for the most part in conjunction with our natural resources. Let's see here. So about the book itself, it's called Wildland Sentinel, Field Notes from an Iowa Conservation Officer. When I wrote the book, I wanted it to be kind of more than just a collection of stories between two covers. I wanted it to flow. I wanted there to be some recurring characters so you could get to know some of my coworkers or people I deal with throughout, you know, the entire book and connect with those people. I think some people were surprised by the content of the book because there are other, you know, game warden books out there, and a lot of them contain just like funny stories that happen, because there are a lot of funny things that happen in my line of work, but there are also a lot of things that aren't funny at all. And I wanted to include, you know, a good feeling of the variety of things that we cover and that happen to us as conservation officers. So I guess that's where I'll start. And if I see we have one question in there. I'm trying to, Tina, do you want to?
Yeah, so the first question I see, thank you for asking this question, Megan. Let's take a look. The most common infractions, Erika, that you deal with. Can you provide some examples?
So I guess how I'd answer that, the job of a conservation officer, and especially in a county like, I cover Johnson County, so the Iowa City area, what we're doing different times of the year really depends on the season. So during summer, I'm usually out on a patrol boat on the Coralville Reservoir, Lake McBride, usually the reservoir. And so, you know, that time of year, I'm mainly dealing with boating issues. So I'm stopping people for boating safety problems or things like that. I really, during the summer, my main thing is trying to enforce drunk boating. So trying to stop people from operating while intoxicated on the river or on the lake. Other times of the year, probably the most common infraction is just like license violations. We do a lot of compliance checks to make sure people have the licenses that they need to have in order to fish and hunt and trap and do those types of things. But really the reason we're out there doing those compliance checks is trying to get to maybe some of the bigger problems, some, you know, bigger poaching cases, and problems where people are misusing our wildlife management areas and our public areas. So those are probably the most common, is just license problems, but those usually lead to, or not, I shouldn't say usually, they don't usually, but they will lead to bigger cases that we try to dive into.
That was a great question. And Erika, let's expand on that a little bit, because in a couple of sections of the book, I'm thinking of two sections after I saw that question. In one section of the book, there is an example where you had an intern that was working with you, a patrol intern, and there was an issue with a red boat, and you had left work and you were excited to be able to leave work on a long weekend. You were leaving and the intern was still patrolling the water. And you got a call to go back to work. And what ensued was a unique experience. Can you explain a little bit about that situation and the gravity of some of these things that you have to deal with on a daily basis? Yeah,
so I think that touches on one of the things that I've found since I've been doing this for 20 years, that the job really has kind of changed from the time I started until now. And one of the ways it's changed is that we're dealing with, we're kind of sometimes thrown into situations that that don't necessarily fall under the umbrella of conservation law enforcement. So I think the story you're talking about, I was patrolling on the Coralville Reservoir with my seasonal patrol officer and was gonna head home for the day, like you said, and got partway home and he called me, and I could tell from the sound of his voice that he wanted me like back there at the boat ramp right now. So I went back, and what ensued was a very long drawn out case that basically entailed a couple on a boat, middle-aged couple, a guy and a lady, and the guy was attempting to rape this woman on the on the reservoir. So the we basically had to, you know, get this boat stopped. We had some complaints of other boaters that this lady was trying to, I guess, hint to other boaters or motion to other boaters that she was not safe on that boat. So we had to get the boat stopped and try to sort out exactly what was going on. And it, as most things that happen to me, they're never like cut and dry, easy things to solve. And in this case, the guy was not only intoxicated, but you know, played the card of pretending to have a diabetic attack, and, you know, had to be taken by ambulance and all this other stuff. So just to kind of take the attention away from what he was actually trying to do when he was out on the water. So that turned into a big, long mess of a case, and kind of probably brings up another thing we'll talk about at some point, but oftentimes these cases get to the county attorney's office and don't, they kind of dissolve before my eyes on the prosecutor's desk. Oftentimes they get pled out or reduced to something much less serious, or just thrown out altogether. So we can talk about that later on too.
Yeah, and I don't want to give away what happens in the end, because I want people to be able to see what happens in the end of the book. But that's a section of the book I had a hard time, well, the whole book, in my opinion, I had a hard time setting it down, because after you start reading, you imagine, how can this happen? You're a conservation officer. You'd think you'd be conserving our environment, but yet there's so many issues that you have to deal with. Like you said in the beginning, we are our own worst enemy as humans, and that's really what you're doing, is making sure that humans are doing the right thing.
So somebody asked, since I may get called into court, do I have to wear a body camera? I've been a fan of body cameras since they came out. We just recently finally were all issued a department issued body camera. Mine is actually, here, it looks like this. It's a cell phone. But whoops, now you're all on camera. That was not good.
Recording stopped.
So now I do have that body camera footage I can fall back on when I go to court. You'd be surprised how often they don't use that footage in court cases. Oftentimes I'm pushing them, hey, you know, the person said this on camera, this happened on camera. You know, if you just play this video, like, it should be obvious what happened. But oftentimes they don't go with that footage. But I do like having the camera. Before we were issued that, I bought my own camera, and I also had one donated to me by Kirkwood. So I've been wearing one for several years, even before other people were. I just feel like you know, if you're in law enforcement, you're going to get complaints filed against you no matter what, because you don't always make everybody happy. You know, there's always somebody that's going to be unhappy with what you're doing. And I always wanted to have that as a backup to say, look, I didn't treat this person poorly. This is, you know, you can watch on video how I handled that. So, yep, we try to press record when you know, whenever we deal with somebody in the public. So
Erika, the next question we've got from Maggie is, what parts are your profession or your favorite? And on the counter side of that, what is the least likable things that you do on a daily basis?
So I think, one of my favorite things about this job, and I'm only just now, I think, becoming kind of good at it. I think it took me a long time to get to this point, but one of my favorite things is like piecing together a case. And I don't know about you guys, but I read Nancy Drew when I was young, and being able to kind of feel like I'm solving a mystery of some kind, or I'm gathering clues and evidence, and and being able to kind of put those together where they make sense, and I can take it to a county attorney and say, here's my case. Everything lays out, the way it should, and it, to me at least, is obvious that this person violated this criminal code. So I think that's one of my favorite things, is just being able to put together a case. I do like the summertime. Believe it or not, I like trying to find drunk drivers on the water. I think ever since, there is one story in the book where I talk about a 12-year-old girl who was killed on the Coralville Reservoir. And ever since that happened, that was kind of a wake-up point for me. And I just, from that moment on, really hammer down on drunk drivers, because I don't want that to happen again. So those are probably two of my favorite things. What do I like the least? I don't like testifying in court at all. I get nervous. I just feel like when you're questioned by a defense attorney, sometimes it's hard to not feel like, am I the one on trial here? But it's just part of the job. I think I'm getting better at it. It's taken a long time, but I would say that's probably the thing I like the least, is having to testify as a witness.
A question we've got from Megan, Erika, is what's the scariest situation that you've been in?
Oh, there's been several times where I think we're a little bit different than like a county deputy situation or a city police officer situation where you can like get on your radio and call for backup. I mean, we can do that, but likely our backup's not going to be very close to us. So I think the scariest situations come when you're dealing with somebody maybe who's not happy with what you're doing, or they're most people we deal with do have firearms, do have knives, because that's what you use to hunt. Typically, they have some kind of weapon. So you're out in the boonies with this person and they're not happy with you. That always kind of makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable. So I think that's probably, in general, I don't know if I have like one scariest situation, but kind of just the feeling like, I wish I had someone with me right now. Sometimes, I'm kind of a chicken about patrolling wildlife areas at night. Just kind of gives me the creeps a little bit when we're out all by ourselves and driving around on these kind of creepy areas at night. Gives you a little bit of a weird tingling up your spine sometimes. But yeah, I think those are probably the scariest types, just kind of in general situations.
Erika, is there a section of the book that you could take us down, just an excerpt, that you could guide us down that path? I have another question in my mind that I'd like to ask, but I'd like to hear a little bit more from the book. Could you share?
Do you have a section in mind, or?
Well, I'm thinking off the top of my head, on page 83, you talk about Memorial Day and how holidays really bring out people that really don't have much boating experience, and it brings out all kinds. I don't know if that would be a good section to read, or if you have one earmarked.
Yeah, I can do that. It was Memorial Day weekend, the first foray on the water for the 3 seasonal patrol officers. The entire crew was new to the lake. They were green, inexperienced, and youthful. They hadn't yet been worn thin by bureaucratic headaches, and their patience was not yet frayed by government employment. They were glad to be out of college for the summer, and they were ready for some excitement. The seasonals had spent the last 2 weeks in off-site training, so I was giving them a tour of the Coralville Reservoir. As one of the busiest boating weekends of the year, this was a poor time for an orientation session, but it was the first chance I had had to familiarize them with the water where they'd be spending their next 3 months. They needed to know the shallow areas, the beaches, the known drug use spots, the campgrounds, the boat ramps, and the problem boaters. We'd only been on the lake a couple of hours, but a call came over the radio. Just as we approached the dam at the southernmost tip of the lake, I heard the county dispatcher sending deputies toward Mahaffey Bridge. Mahaffey Bridge marks the center point of the reservoir. All boat traffic moving between the north and south sections funnels through the no-wake zone under the bridge. I turned up the volume on the radio in an attempt to make out the radio traffic over the wind, the rumble of our patrol boat motor, and the jet skis whining past. The boat radio was notoriously unreliable and often cut out at key moments, turning efforts to decipher transmitted information into something like playing a preschooler's game of telephone. The most I was able to make out of this call pertained to a possible jumper. Since moving to the territory 10 years before, I had frequently heard rumors of late-night drunken jumps off Mahaffey Bridge into the reservoir below, but I had yet to actually witness it. I hit the siren. Poorly positioned under the T-top, the sound wailed with a wavering high-pitched tone that bounced off the roof and around the cabin, relentlessly piercing our eardrums and effectively cutting off our ability to hear any additional radio traffic. We cruised full throttle, white-knuckling the bars of the console as we skipped and thumped over waves, teetering on the edge of control, weaving through boat traffic. We pounded around the final bend before the bridge came into view. Several boats were clustered in the area, and a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers park ranger was standing at the adjacent boat ramp. I pulled up close enough to yell at him. "We got a call about a person jumping from the bridge. What do you know?" "All I know is that a girl's missing somewhere by the bridge," he called out. "I heard she may have fell from a boat." So that's I don't know if that's what you were actually talking about, Tina. But,
Yeah.
That's the beginning of the story that I was just referring to as far as the 12-year-old that got killed on the reservoir.
Yeah, the way that you write, it really draws a person to want to continue. It's hard to find a stopping point because you want to know what you found through your investigation process. Maggie has asked a question. If you weren't a conservation officer, what other job might you have? Any plans on writing? I think Maggie understands how she can see how well you write. What kind of books do you like to read? So first, let's address that first question. If you weren't a conservation officer, what line of work might you be in, Erika?
Oh man. I don't know. Do they hire people my age to do anything new anymore? If I could, I don't know. I think there's times when, I think anybody who works for the government, there's times when you wish you didn't. But I think I really like, I would like to be a detective. I think that'd be fun. I mean, fun in a morbid way sometimes, but you know, but I'd also like to write some more too. So I don't know. I think it'd be ideal if you could do another job that you could write about, at least in my book.
So that answers your writing plan.
That's a bad answer, but I tried.
But Maggie, this might interest you. I've asked Erika in the past, what does she do to exercise her mind in writing? And she really doesn't. This just comes as a natural talent. Is that right, Erika?
Well, I will say that I am much more diligent these days about writing incident and investigative reports. For instance, today I spent my entire day, this is going to seem dumb, but I spent my entire day trying to chase down two different people. One of them dumped a couple pickup loads full of garbage at one of the wildlife areas, and when that happens, we sift through the garbage and try to look for names of people, and found a name on somebody's prescription bottle of pills. And so I went trying to find this person, and I ended up finding him, and it turns into, well, so-and-so did it. So you end up looking for those people. So as this case is, you know, it's just a garbage dumping case, but it's still a case. And so as this happens, you know, at the end of the day, I write down what happened. And I do that because my memory is horrible. And when I get to court, I want to be able to say, these are the steps I followed, even though this isn't a murder case or anything. It's a garbage dumping case, but still, I lay out my reports much more diligently now than I ever did before. Before I would just kind of hope that I remembered when I got to court what happened and who was involved. Now I write it down, even though I have a body camera. I still write it down. Part of the reason I do that is because now I put all my reports in a binder, knowing that when I go to write a second book, I can go back to my binder and really draw out details, and it brings back memories of, you know, even these little tiny cases that don't seem like much now. Sometimes those are the best things to write about, that are kind of not, maybe they're not the case of the year or the, you know, best poaching case in the world, but they're things that people can relate to. You know, how many of us have been to a wild area and seen garbage dumped? You know, probably most people. And just the work, I spent almost all day trying to find these people. So it's just the work that goes into a garbage dump case, you know, you wouldn't think about. But so that's, I do teach report writing to our officers, to our new officers that come on. It's a different style of writing, obviously, than writing a book, but it's still very surprising to me how many people who are college graduates really have a hard time laying down their thoughts in a way that makes sense. And I would be interested to hear from county attorneys, I guess, across the state, or magistrates or judges, you know, like how these reports look coming across their desk, like do they make sense or not? So I think my writing style was based on writing those reports, and I try to be more creative when I'm writing a book. But what kind of books do I like to read? I am a very eclectic reader. I will read just about any type of book. Right now I'm reading I'll Be Gone in the Dark, about the it's by Michelle McNamara, and she was trying to, she was obsessed with finding the Golden State Killer. And so it's a nonfiction book. It's very good. But then, you know, the next book I read will probably be fiction. So I just have a very wide variety of books I like. With the exception, I don't read romance, and I don't really like fantasy.
Erika, Dwayne is asking, I know we've talked a lot about court cases and preparing for that and investigation. How often do you have to attend court for any case?
Not very often, and I think that's why I feel a little bit uncomfortable doing it. Typically, most cases just either get pled out, or people plead guilty, and or they just pay their fine or whatever, and I don't ever see them again. So I think that plays into why I'm a little bit uncomfortable when I do go to court, because I just am a little bit, it's not something I do every day. Certainly not as much as a regular police officer might when they're writing a lot of speeding tickets and, you know, all these they write a lot more tickets probably than I do in a year. So not too often.
Erika, the next question is, do you yourself, when you're not working, which is seldom, do you yourself like to hunt, fish, camp, and do other outdoor activities? What's your release?
So I got into this field of conservation law enforcement not having grown up hunting or fishing. I was very much a hiker, a camper. In college, I got into backpacking a lot. So I kind of came into this differently than I think a lot of my coworkers did. And I talk about that some in the book, how my background does not fit in with the other, with my colleagues in that sense, that most of them knew from a young age this is what they wanted to do. And I mean, from a young age, I had no idea conservation officers existed or what they did or anything. So I did get in a little bit into hunting and fishing when I met my husband, and he does a lot of that, those things. But to be honest, at this point, I don't really do those things anymore. I've got 2 kids and 3 dogs and a job and writing, and I just don't have time. And frankly, it's one of those deals where, like, if you do this for work, it doesn't seem that appealing to me to do it for fun either. So
that's a good segue, Erika, to the next section of the book that I'm thinking about. There's a section that you have the saying of, what the hell? What the hell? Can you expand on that a little bit without giving too much away?
Yeah, I have to entertain myself because I drive around by myself all day long. And one of the ways I entertain myself is by playing this game I call What the Hell game, the What the Hell game. And this stems from the fact that like almost everything I see, especially out at places like the Hawkeye Wildlife Area, make me say to myself like constantly, what the hell are these people doing? So the game I talk about in the book is basically this, you know, a lot of times we drive through wildlife areas trying to sort, you know, and figure out what people are doing. Are they doing the legal things? Are they doing something they shouldn't be doing? And one way that we're actually trained to do this in our field training when we're first hired is to be able to walk up to a car that's either unoccupied or occupied, usually unoccupied, walk up to the car, look inside the car or truck, and be able to tell our field training officer what the person who drove that vehicle to the wildlife area is now doing, even though we can't see them. So we do that by looking for certain items in the car. You know, a lot of times it's pretty easy to figure out what they're doing. You know, right now is pheasant season. So driving out to the wildlife area, I'm probably gonna see some gun cases in the car. I'm gonna see a dog box in the back. I'm gonna see, you know, a box of shotgun shells on the floor. And it's gonna be pretty easy for me to tell these people are out in the field and they're probably pheasant hunting. In the book, I talk about a lot of the ones that I am unable to solve or figure out. People just go to wildlife areas for the strangest reasons, and they do the strangest things there, which I talk about a lot in the book. And it's those kinds of, I don't know if I might have a section flagged here for that. I'm not sure. I don't know. So this isn't in the what the hell section, but it kind of gets at what I'm talking about. It says most people using wildlife areas are there for obvious reasons. The deer hunters swarm to the timber in the late fall. Anglers spend summer nights chasing after big catfish. Birders tromp through the marsh looking to spot a rare species of shorebird. And dog walkers take in the fresh air and open spaces with their canine companions. Other visitors, however, seem to emerge from the fringes of society, only to abscond to the periphery of the wild, in search of a place to hook up, shoot up, find themselves, kill themselves, party, take up residence, or drink themselves into a stupor. For them, the vast acres are less a place rich in nature to be enjoyed than a backdrop for playing out a life, scene, the meaning and motivation of which are so personal as to confound the average observer. The majority of the unsavory things that happen at a place like Hawkeye occur in the shadows, unwitnessed and unexplained. Still, I imagine that the personal truths that even these visitors pursue are the same as those we all hope to find when we visit out of the way places where the world leaves us alone, the noise dampens, and we can find something of ourselves and acknowledge our lives for what they are and all their glorious disarray. So, you know, I'll walk up to a car and see, I think in the book I talked about one car I found that had like, you know, a piece of pizza that I could see was still steaming, sitting on the dashboard, and, you know, a Jane Austen book open on the passenger seat. There was, you know, another car that was full of like white paint cans. You know, just like you walk up and you have no clue where these people are and what they're doing. So the game involves, if I can guess what they're doing and I figure out that I guessed correctly, then I win. And if I can't figure it out, then I lose. Looks like we got more questions there.
That's a great example, Erica. Thank you. There's one question that we have from Megan in regards to the Iowa DNR and the budget shortages. Have they impacted your work day to day? And is the funding for a conservation officer role in jeopardy, or hiring new conservation officers?
So the conservation officer position is funded by the Fish and Game Trust Fund, which is primarily funded by people who buy hunting and fishing licenses, trapping licenses. So we're funded differently than other parts of the DNR. So it really is dependent on how many people are out buying licenses as to how our budget looks. Ironically, I mean, I'm not an expert in our budget, but I think since COVID-19 started, I know that our parks, for one, have been extremely busy. And I remember seeing an email about hunting license numbers going up once the pandemic started, because people are, I think, needing to be out. You know, they would typically go to the movies or whatever. Well, you're not doing that. So people are going outdoors more than they were before. So there's always funding problems as far as like hiring new conservation officers. We're very spread thin, and we need more. We just did hire a group, so I think that, you know, we're still working on filling positions, but it hasn't shut down due to COVID-19.
Before we go on to the next question, Erika, I'd like to highlight behind you some of the artwork that's from the book. Behind you is 2 prints. Can you tell us about, it's not very often that you have a great author also have the ability to do their own artwork too. Can you share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I don't know, do you want to put up a couple of those pictures?
Yeah.
Let's see, I have the pictures here. Let me see if I can share my screen.
This is great.
So this, if you want to pause it there.
Okay.
So yeah, I did all the artwork. My mom was an art teacher. She's retired. She's in her 70s, but I've always had an interest in art. And these prints were all done by their lino block prints. So basically, except they were done with a softer block material than linoleum. So they're kind of a rubber material. And I would carve out all the sections that don't have that are white. So anything white I carved out with carving tools and rolled ink over that, and you know, laid the paper on top of the ink rolled on that plate and printed it that way. So all the artwork are those block prints that I've done that way. And it was actually kind of a, there shows the process a little bit. You can see that I'm not always the brightest. So sometimes I would start these prints and realize partway through that I didn't reverse the writing. You have to reverse the writing for it to turn out correctly when you print it. And I'd get partway done and realize I needed to start completely over again. So yeah, that shows a little bit of the process. I've had some people want to buy prints, and I do have those for sale. So all the ones that are like bigger in the book, but I enjoyed the process. It gave me a break when I had a hard time thinking of what to write next, or I wanted to take a break from writing. This is really kind of a meditative thing almost to work on these types of block prints, because you're sitting there and just carving, and it's really a relaxing thing to do, at least until you screw up, then it's not relaxing anymore.
They look great. Maggie agrees. She says that those prints are awesome.
Yeah, I like that they're, you know, I don't think block prints are meant to be perfect. So the ink prints off differently on every single one, and but that's okay. So I've had some people that have purchased these, and a couple other officers have purchased, you know, like this badge one that I have behind me for their home offices.
That's great. Erika, we've got a couple of questions yet to get to, and we're almost to a quarter of the hour. The next question we have is, are you allowed to have a dog with you while you're on duty, since you're alone most of the time?
As of right now, we are. And I used to have a chocolate lab that I always took with me all the time. And actually, she did make me feel a little bit better when I was working alone. A couple times she caused problems. When I was stationed in Webster County, I used to go out on Brushy Creek and check fishermen, and she'd love to go in the boat, so I'd take her in the boat. And one time we pulled up to a boat to check a fisherman, and he was eating a sandwich, and labs like to eat sandwiches. So that was kind of her last trip on the boat. But she didn't actually take his sandwich, but she did jump into his boat. So I figured that was probably a bad thing. So she didn't get to go anymore. I do have 3 dogs. I don't really take them anymore, mostly because the hair gets in all the electronic equipment and it gets hard to clean. But a lot of guys do take their dogs, and some of their dogs, we've had dogs that are, you know, trained to look for shell casings, you know, have been able to find evidence that we've not been able, you know, if somebody shoots a hen pheasant, for instance, maybe their dog's able to find that where we necessarily wouldn't be able to find that.
We have a question from Kate, Erica. If one wants to become a naturalist or a conservation officer, what college classes do they need to take, or what programs, college programs?
So naturalist would be very different. Well, I shouldn't say be very different. Naturalist, you know, you're going to be focusing more on the outreach, education and outreach. My degree is from Luther in biology. So I think you'd want to stick to the natural sciences and get a degree in that. Conservation officers, you know, it really varies on, depending on who our chief is at the moment. And some of our chiefs have preferred people who have a fish and wildlife background, like a biology, wildlife management background, whereas others have preferred people who have a criminal justice background. So it really depends on who is in charge and who's doing the hiring. But I would recommend, I mean, I don't think we have a requirement for a 4-year degree, but I can tell you that the positions that we've ever offered to people, I mean, everybody has a degree that interviews or that gets an interview, and there's a lot of applicants for each opening. So you're competing against, I always tell young people that really don't want to go to college, that you're competing against people who went to college, and it's going to be hard to get an interview without a degree.
That's good advice.
Yeah, I mean, some of our guys have more of a police background, and some have more of a fish and game background.
Erica, Mary is asking a question. If there's one thing that you could tell the public, if the public only knew, do you ever find yourself thinking that something that you'd want the public to be aware of?
Oh, that's a tough one. There's a lot I want the public to know. It's hard to narrow it down. You know, in the book I write quite a bit about kind of one of the running themes through the book is how our public land is often a little bit of the center of a tug of war game between all these different people who want to use the land in the ways they see fit. And sometimes that doesn't necessarily correspond with how other people want to use the land. And public land is for all of us. So I think that one thing I wish the public would understand more is that even though they want to be doing this thing right here, right now, that's not really what's best for the land. That's not really what everybody else wants them to be doing with the land. So being able to kind of like calm down and think about the land above themselves sometimes would be nice. People get real angry at me oftentimes at Hawkeye if I stop them from doing something that they want to be doing, whether that's shooting off fireworks or whether that's parking their RV in the, you know, in the woods where they can't be. And they just have they seem to not be able to comprehend like why I'm stopping them from doing that stuff. So I wish that I could kind of pound that into their brains that like, I'm here to protect the natural resources and not necessarily to cater to what you want to be doing.
A question we have from...
Yeah, the other part is just that I wish that people would, not just to sell my book, but to read the book, to see the wide variety of stuff we do, because people very much don't understand like the wide variety of things that we're dealing with. You know, I don't know how many times a year I hear, why are you carrying a gun? Like, so what are you going to do? Shoot an animal with the gun? You know, they just have no understanding that we're dealing with people in dangerous situations just like any other law enforcement officer.
Do you have to recertify or train your skills, Erica? like the emphasis over criminal activity, is there any specific training or certification that you need?
Yeah, so we would have the same training. First of all, we'd have the same training as any other law enforcement officer, going through the Law Enforcement Academy and all the recertifications that come with that, as far as defensive tactics and firearms training. And then we also have a fish and game, or a DNR academy, we call it. So when you're hired, you go through several month-long training where you're scattered, or you're moved from different place to different place throughout the state, to learn about different things that are specific to conservation law enforcement, whether that's duck hunting enforcement, commercial fishing. You know, there's a wide variety of things that you may not know going into it that you need to be trained on. So we're focusing on fish and game, natural resources law enforcement, especially with the emphasis on more criminal activity. I'm not sure exactly what she means, I guess, but we just go through a huge variety of training, from interview and interrogation, pursuit driving, lots of different specialized trainings that we go through. One thing I would point out too, with kind of the scrutiny on law enforcement these days, you'll find in my book that we do deal with a lot of people with mental health issues. And we, like everybody else, need more training in that area, because we deal with that a lot, and oftentimes are left with trying to handle something that we've only had very minimal training in.
It looks like Dwayne would like to know more information about your chain of command with the conservation officer, and Kayla Lyons is in charge of the Iowa DNR. What does that reporting structure look like for the conservation officers?
So we're set up a lot like, this has changed to, you know, in more recent years, we've moved more towards kind of the same setup that a police department would have. You know, what used to be called my supervisor is now my captain. I just got promoted to sergeant, so I'm one of 2 sergeants in my district. So we have that kind of same layout, where we have field officers, sergeants, which we're working sergeants, so it's a little bit different than a police department. It might be a desk sergeant, captains, and then we have a chief. Right now we don't have an assistant chief, but I think at some point we probably will. So it's kind of set up like that, and it's very, I guess it used to be more open as far as being able to go talk to, like, if I have an issue, to go talk to the chief about it. Now I'm very much told to follow the chain of command, and that's new for me, and I'm not a military person, or not used to that kind of thing. So that's taken some adjustment.
Thanks for answering that, Erika. We'll have that as the final question. Prior to us closing, I want to recommend that you check out the book or purchase the book. We're going to talk about where you can buy the book. I would recommend this because as you read this book, it really takes you through the tangled investigations that Erika spoke about, how she responds to natural disasters, dealing with people, hauling drunks to jail, and the what the hell game, just learning about all of those things and all those tangled webs that she manages. She's got memorable characters in the book that repeat themselves, while doing this, all while having a sense of hope for Iowa's remaining wild places. I would recommend this book. And let's hear about the different places in Dubuque. River Lights, is that right? River Lights is an option for purchase?
Yeah. River Lights Bookstore has copies available. Carnegie-Stout Public Library has a couple of copies that you can check out and borrow. And the University of Iowa Press also has the books available on their website. There goes my light again, right? Yep. If you contact the library, we'll get you in touch with either a seller, or we can lend a copy to you. I wanted to, if it's okay, we're kind of at the end, but if I could unmute everyone. If anyone had any quick comments or last minute questions, we could see if we could
Here's a big talker.
have people go ahead and ask.
All right, so everyone's unmuted. So if you have any further questions for Erika, you can voice them now.
Service, Erika.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate it. Well, I hope that, I hope if you get a chance to read it, you know, you reach out, or if you have any
Erika.
comments. If anybody is interested at some point in a signed book, you can always email me, and I think that, I don't know, if you want to put my email address out somewhere, you can do that.
Yeah, I can do that.
And I can get a copy, a signed copy to you if you wanted to use those for gifts or anything. Yeah, so I'm really glad that you all joined us, and I'm open to, I've appeared on some people's book clubs, and I'm more than happy to do that kind of thing too, so I appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you.
Erika has a website, www.erikabillerbeck.com. I think you could get in touch with her that way. Also, if you reply to the email that I sent out with the Zoom links, I could get you in touch with Erika through the email that way. And if you have any comments or suggestions for this format of Zoom event, I'd like to hear those as well. It would help us improve and maybe think of some more ideas for upcoming events with Carnegie-Stout Library. Were there any last minute questions or comments?
Hopefully sometime we can do this kind of stuff in person.
Yeah, we'd really love
Yeah.
to do that. I just wanted to say, Erika, the book is really impressive. It's not just about what you're doing on a daily basis, but you include thoughts about the meaning of your work, what it means for the community and for your own children and family. There's a bit of action and also introspection and nature writing. It's just got so much going on.
I really wanted to have it include that stuff because I'm kind of an introverted person, and so a lot of things just swirl around in my mind all the time, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because that was an important part of the book to me, is just personal reflection and kind of including some of our natural history from the state in there.
Yeah, the writing is fantastic, and plus the artwork, so I really hope people get a chance to read it. Well, thank you very much, Erika, and also thank you, Tina, and that's it. Thanks for coming.
Thank
And
you.
thank you to those who said you liked my column. I appreciate it.